The death and burial of Sarah. While Abraham was engaged in the sacrifice, Satan again went to Sarah and appeared to her in the figure of an old man, very humble and meek, and said to her, "I am so sorry to bear bad news, but Abraham has killed your son." He took Isaac, built an altar, and slaughtered him as a sacrifice. Isaac cried and pleaded, but Abraham showed no compassion, not even looking Isaac in the eye. After saying these words to Sarah, Satan went away. She thought him to be an old man, tagging along with the young men and Abraham. Sarah lifted up her voice and cried bitterly, saying, my son Isaac? Why not me dead? That I could bear, but not you. I am nothing but grief. I raised you, my constant joy. Now my joy is turned to darkness. I cried and prayed for a son for 70 years, till I bore you at 90. Now have you been offered to the knife and the fire by my husband? But I console myself, it being the word of God, and you did perform the command of your God. For who can transgress the word of our God, in whose hands is the soul of every living creature? You are just, O Lord our God, for all your works are good and righteous. For I yet rejoice with the word you commanded. While I weep bitterly, my heart still rejoices. Sarah laid her head on the lap of one of her handmaids, and she became as still as stone. She rose up afterward and went about making inquiries concerning her son, till she came to Hebron. But no one could tell her what had happened to Isaac. Her servants went to seek him in the house of Shem and Eber, and throughout the whole land, but he was not to be found. And behold, Satan came to Sarah in the shape of an old man, and said to her, I spoke falsely to you, for Abraham did not kill his son. He is not dead. And when she heard these words, her joy was so violent that her soul went out from her. When Abraham and Isaac finally returned to Beersheba, they looked for Sarah but could not find her. When they made inquiries, they were told she had gone as far as Hebron to seek them. Abraham and Isaac went looking for her, and when they learned that she was dead, they cried bitterly. And Isaac said, Oh, my mother, how could you leave me? And where have you gone? Abraham and all his servants wept and mourned over her, a great and heavy mourning. Abraham could not even pray, but spent his time in mourning and weeping over Sarah. And indeed, he had great reason to mourn his loss, for even in her old age, Sarah retained the beauty of her youth and the innocence of her childhood. The death of Sarah was a loss not only for Abraham and his family, but for the whole country. So long as she was alive, all went well in the land. After her death, confusion was everywhere. The weeping, lamenting, and wailing over her was universal, and Abraham, instead of receiving consolation, had to offer consolation to others. He spoke to the people and said, My children, take not the going of Sarah too much to heart, for we all loved her and console each other, the pious and the impious alike. I pray you now, give me a burying place here with you, not as a gift, but for money. In these last few words, Abraham's unassuming modesty was expressed. God had promised him the whole land, yet when he came to bury his dead, he had to pay for the grave. It did not enter his heart to cast aspersion upon the ways of God. In all humility, he spoke to the people of Hebron, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner here with you. Therefore, God spoke to him and said, You did bear yourself modestly. As you live, I will appoint you Lord and Prince over them. To the people themselves, Abraham appeared like an angel, and they answered his words, saying, You are a prince of God among us. Take your choice of our sepulchres to bury your wife, among the rich if you will, or among the poor if you like. Abraham first of all gave thanks to God for the friendly feeling shown to him by the children of Hebron. and then he continued his negotiations for the cave of Machpelah. He had long known the peculiar value of this spot. Adam had chosen it for the burial place for himself, for he had feared his body might be used for idolatrous purposes after his death. He therefore designated the cave of Machpelah as the place of his burial, and in the depths his corpse was laid, so that none might find it. When he interred Eve there, Adam wanted to dig deeper, because he smelled the sweet fragrance of paradise near the entrance. But a heavenly voice called to him, "Enough." Adam himself was buried there by Seth, and until the time of Abraham, the place was guarded by angels, who kept a perpetual fire burning near it, so that none dared approach and bury their dead. Now it happened on that day when Abraham received angels in his tent, and he wanted to slaughter an ox for their entertainment, that the ox ran away, and in his pursuit Abraham entered the cave of Machpelah. There he saw Adam and Eve stretched out on couches, candles burning at the head of their resting places, while a sweet scent pervaded the cave. Therefore Adam wished to acquire the cave from the children of Heth, the inhabitants of the city of Jebus. They said to him, "We know that in time to come God will give these lands to your descendants. Would you now swear a covenant with us that Israel shall not take the city of Jebus from its inhabitants without their consent?" Abraham agreed to the condition, thus acquiring the field from Ephron, who owned it at the time. This happened the very day on which Ephron had been made the chief of Heth. God raised him to that position so that Abraham might not have to have dealings with men of low rank. The other advantage was that Ephron at first refused to sell the field, and only the threat of the children of Heth to dispose him from his office unless he fulfilled the desire of Abraham could induce him to sell the field. Acting deceitfully, Ephron offered to give Abraham the field without compensation. But when Abraham insisted on paying for it, Ephron said, "My lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver, what is that between me and you?" Showing only too well that the money was of greatest consequence to him. Abraham understood his words, and when he came to pay for the field, he weighed out the sum agreed upon in the best of current coin. A deed, signed by 4 witnesses, was drawn up, and the field of Ephron, which contained the cave, were titled to Abraham and his descendants for all time. The burial of Sarah then took place, amid great magnificence and the sympathy of all. Shem and his son Eber, Abimelech king of the Philistines, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, as well as all the great of the land, followed her procession. 7 days' mourning were kept for her, and all the inhabitants of the land came to console Abraham and Isaac. When Abraham entered the cave to place the body of Sarah within, Adam and Eve refused to remain there, because, they said, "As it is, we are ashamed in the presence of God on account of the sin we committed, and now we shall be even more ashamed on account of your good deeds." Abraham soothed Adam. He promised to pray to God for him, and the need for shame be removed. Adam then resumed his place, and Abraham entombed Sarah. At the same time, he carried Eve, resisting, back to her place. 1 year after the death of Sarah, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, also died, at the age of 193. His successor on the throne was his 12-year-old son, Ben-Melech, who then took the name of his father after his ascension. Abraham did not fail to pay a visit of condolence at the court of Abimelech. Lot also died about this time, at the age of 142. His sons, Moab and Ammon, both married Canaanite women. Moab begot a son, and Ammon had 6 sons, and the descendants of both were exceedingly numerous. Abraham suffered another severe loss at the same time in the death of his brother Nahor, whose days ended at Haran, when he had reached the age of 172 years. Eliezer's mission. The death of Sarah dealt Abraham a blow from which he never recovered. So long as she was alive, he felt himself young and vigorous, but after she had passed away, old age suddenly overtook him. It was he himself who made the plea that age should be shown by suitable signs and tokens. Before the time of Abraham, an old man was not distinguishable externally from a young man, and as Isaac was the image of his father, it happened frequently that father and son were mistaken for each other, and a request meant for one was made to the other. Abraham prayed, therefore, that old age might have marks to distinguish it from youth, and God granted his petition. And since the time of Abraham, the appearance of men changes in old age. This is one of the 7 great wonders that have occurred in the course of history. The blessings of God did not forsake Abraham in old age, that it might not be said that his wealth was granted to him for the sake of Sarah. God prospered him even after her death. Hagar bore him a daughter, and Ishmael repented of his evil ways and subordinated himself to Isaac. As Abraham enjoyed undisturbed happiness in his family, so also the outside world. The kings of the east and west eagerly besieged the door of his house in order to derive benefit from his wisdom. From his neck a precious stone was suspended, which possessed the power of healing the sick who looked upon it. On the death of Abraham, God attached it to the wheel of the sun. The greatest blessing enjoyed by him, and none beside except his son Isaac and Jacob, the son of Isaac, was that the evil inclination had no power over him, so that in his life he had a glimpse of the future world. But all these divine blessings showered upon Abraham were not undeserved. He was clean of hand and pure of heart. He did not lift up his soul to vanity. He fulfilled all the commands that were revealed later, even the rabbinical injunctions, as, for instance, the one relating to the limits of a Sabbath day's journey. For this his reward was that God disclosed to him the new teachings, which he expounded daily in the heavenly academy. But one thing lacked to complete the happiness of Abraham, the marriage of Isaac. He therefore called for his old servant, Eliezer. Eliezer resembled his master not only externally in his appearance, but also spiritually. Like Abraham, he possessed full power over the evil inclination, and like the master, the servant was adept in the law. Abraham spoke the following words to Eliezer: I am stricken in age, and I know not the day of my death. Therefore, prepare yourself and go to my old country, to my kindred, and fetch a wife for my son. He said this by reason of the resolution he had taken immediately after the sacrifice of Isaac on Moriah. For he had said within himself that if the sacrifice had been executed, Isaac would have gone from the world childless. Now he was even ready to choose a wife for his son from among the daughters of his 3 friends, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, because he knew them to be pious, and he did not attach much importance to aristocratic stock. Then God spoke to him and said, Concern yourself not about a wife for Isaac. One has already been provided for him. And it was made known to Abraham that Milcah, the wife of his brother Nahor, childless until the birth of Isaac, had then been remembered by God and made fruitful. She bore Bethuel, and he in turn, at the time of Isaac's sacrifice, begot the daughter destined to be the wife of Isaac. So Abraham decided to take a wife for Isaac from his own family. He argued that as any wife he chose would have to become a convert, it would be best to use his own stock, which did have the first claim on him. Eliezer now said to his master, What if no woman will be willing to follow me to this land? May I then marry my own daughter to Isaac? No, replied Abraham. You are of the accursed race, and my son is of the blessed race, and curse and blessing cannot be united. But beware that you do not bring my son to the land from where I came, for if you brought him there, it would be as though you took him to hell. God, who sets the heavens in motion, he will set this matter right. He that took me from my father's house and spoke to me, swearing to me in Haran, and at the covenant of the pieces, that he would give this land to my seed. He shall send his excellent angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son. Eliezer then swore to his master concerning the matter, and Abraham made him take an oath by the sign of the covenant. The wooing of Rebekah. Attended by 10 men, mounted upon 10 camels laden with jewels and trinkets, Eliezer went to Haran under the convoy of 2 angels, the one appointed to keep guard over Eliezer, the other over Rebekah. The journey to Haran took but a few hours, because the earth went up to meet him in a wonderful way. He stopped at the well of water and prayed to God that he would permit him to distinguish the wife appointed for Isaac by this token, that she alone, and not the others, would give him drink. Strictly speaking, this wish was unseemly, for what if a bondswoman had given him water to drink? But God granted his request. All the damsels said they could not give him any water, because they had to take it home. Then Rebekah appeared, coming to the well against her will, for she was the daughter of Bethuel, king of Haran. When Eliezer addressed his request for water to this young innocent child, not only was she ready to do his bidding, but she rebuked the other maidens on account of their discourtesy to a stranger. Eliezer noticed, too, how the water rose up to her of its own accord from the bottom of the well, so that she needed not to exert herself drawing it. Now, having scrutinized her carefully, he felt certain that she was the wife chosen for Isaac. He then gave her a nose ring, in which was set a precious stone, 1/2 shekel in weight, foreshadowing the 1/2 shekel which her descendants would later bring to the sanctuary, year by year. He also gave her 2 bracelets of 10 shekels weight in gold, in token of the 2 tables of stone with the 10 commandments engraved on them. When Rebekah, bearing the jewels, went to her mother and to her brother Laban, Laban went out to Eliezer in order to slay him and take his treasures. Laban soon learned that it was not wise to go up against a giant like Eliezer. He met him at the moment when Eliezer seized 2 camels and carried them across the stream. Besides, on account of Eliezer's close resemblance to Abraham, Laban thought he saw Abraham before him, and he said, "Come in, you blessed of the Lord. You need not stand out here. I have cleansed my house of idols." But when Eliezer arrived at the house of Bethuel, they tried to kill him with cunning, setting poisoned food before him. Luckily, he refused to eat before he had discharged himself of his errand. While he was telling his story, it was ordained by God that the dish intended for him should be switched to stand in front of Bethuel, who ate it and died. Eliezer showed the document in which Abraham deeded all his possessions to Isaac, and he made it known to the family of Abraham how deeply attached to them his master was, in spite of the long years of separation. Yet he let them know at the same time that Abraham was not dependent wholly upon them. He might seek a wife for his son from among the daughters of Ishmael or Lot. At first the kindred of Abraham consented to let Rebekah go with Eliezer, but as Bethuel had died in the meantime, they did not want to give Rebekah in marriage without consulting her. Besides, they deemed it proper that she should remain at home at least during the week of mourning for her father. But Eliezer, seeing the angel waiting for him, would have no delay, and he said, "The man who came with me and eased my way waits for me outside." And as Rebekah professed herself ready to go at once with Eliezer, her mother and brother granted her wish and dismissed her with their blessings. But their blessings did not come from the bottom of their hearts. Indeed, as a rule, the blessing of the impious is a curse, and because of that, Rebekah remained barren for years. Eliezer's return to Canaan was as wonderful as his going to Haran had been. A 17 days' journey he accomplished in 3 hours. He left Haran at noon, and he arrived at Hebron at 3 o'clock, the time for the minna prayer which had been introduced by Isaac. Isaac was in the posture of praying when Rebekah first laid eyes on him, and she asked Eliezer who the man was. He was not an ordinary individual. She noticed the unusual beauty of Isaac, and also an angel accompanied him. so her question was not dictated by mere curiosity. At this moment, she learned through the Holy Spirit that she was destined to become the mother of the godless Esau. Terror seized her at the knowledge, and trembling, she fell from the camel and injured herself. After Isaac heard the wonderful adventures of Eliezer, he took Rebekah to the tent of his deceased mother, Sarah, where she showed herself worthy to be the successor. The cloud that had been visible over the tent during the life of Sarah reappeared. The light shone again that Sarah had kindled at the coming of the Sabbath, and that had burned miraculously throughout the week. The blessing returned and hovered over the dough kneaded by Sarah. The gates of the tent were opened again for the needy, wide and spacious, as they had been during the lifetime of Sarah. For 3 years Isaac mourned for his mother, but could find no consolation in the academy of Shem and Eber, his abiding place during that period. But Rebekah comforted him after his mother's death, for she was the counterpart of Sarah in person and spirit. As a reward for having executed to his full satisfaction the mission with which he had charged him, Abraham set Eliezer free. The curse resting on Eliezer, as upon all the descendants of Canaan, was transformed into a blessing, because he ministered to Abraham loyally. Greatest reward of all, God found him worthy of entering paradise alive, a distinction that fell to very few. The last years of Abraham. Rebekah first saw Isaac as he was coming from the home of Hagar, where he had gone after the death of his mother for the purpose of reuniting his father with her. Hagar bore him 6 sons, who did little honor to their father, for they were all idolaters. Abraham, therefore, sent them away from the presence of Isaac, that they might not be singed by Isaac's flame, and gave them instructions to journey westward as far as possible. There he built a city for them, surrounded by an iron wall, so high that the sun could not shine into it. But Abraham provided them with huge gems and pearls, their luster more brilliant than the light of the sun. These gems will be used in the Messianic time, when the moon shall be confounded, and the sun ashamed. Also, Abraham taught them the black arts, with which they held sway over demons and spirits. It is from this city in the east that Laban, Balaam, and Balaam's father Beor derived their sorceries. Aphor, one of the grandsons of Abraham and Hagar, invaded Libya with an armed force, and took possession of the country. From this Aphor, the whole land of Africa has its name. Though Abraham knew full well that Isaac deserved his blessing beyond all his sons, he withheld it from him, that no hostile feelings be aroused among his descendants. He spoke and said, I am but flesh and blood, here today, tomorrow in the grave. What I was able to do for my children, I have done. From now on, what will be God's desire, that will be. And it happened that immediately after the death of Abraham, God himself appeared to Isaac and gave him his blessing. A herald of death. When the day of the death of Abraham drew near, the Lord said to Michael, Arise, go to Abraham and say to him, You shall soon depart from life, so that he might set his house in order before he died. So Michael went to Abraham and found him sitting before his plow ox. Abraham, seeing Michael, but not knowing who he was, saluted him and said, Sit down a little while, and I will order a feast. We will go to my house. Then you may rest, for it is almost evening, and in the morning you may go where you wish. And Abraham called one of his servants and said to him, Go and bring me a beast, that the stranger might sit on it, for he is wearied with his journey. But Michael said, I abstain from sitting on any 4-footed beast. Let us walk till we reach the house. On their way they passed a huge tree, and Abraham heard a voice from its branches singing, Holy are you, because you have kept the purpose for which you were sent. Abraham hid the mystery in his heart, thinking that the stranger did not hear it. Arrived at his house, he ordered the servants to prepare a meal, and while they were busy with their work, he called his son Isaac and said to him, "Arise and put water in the bowl, that we may wash the feet of the stranger." So he brought it as he was commanded, and Abraham said, "I perceive that in this basin I shall never again wash the feet of any man coming to us." Hearing this, Isaac began to weep, and Abraham, seeing his son weep, also wept. And Michal, seeing them weep, wept also. And the tears of Michal fell into the water and became precious stones. Before sitting down to the table, Michal arose, went out for a moment, as if to ease nature, and ascended to heaven in the twinkling of an eye, and stood before the Lord and said to him, "Lord and Master, let your power know that I am unable to remind this righteous man of his death. For I have not seen on earth a man like him, compassionate, hospitable, righteous, truthful, devout, refraining from every evil deed." Then the Lord said to Michal, "Go down to my friend Abraham, and whatever he asks you, do it. And whatever he may eat, you also eat. And in a dream I will cast the thought of the death of Abraham into the heart of Isaac his son, and Isaac will relate the dream. You shall interpret it, and then Abraham will know his end." Michal said, "Lord, all the heavenly spirits are incorporeal, and neither eat nor drink, and this man has set before me a table with an abundance of goods, earthly and corruptible. Now, Lord, what shall I do?" The Lord answered him, "Go down to him and take no thought of this, for when you sit down with him, I will send upon you a devouring spirit, and it will consume out of your hands and through your mouth all that is on the table." Then Michal went into the house of Abraham, and they ate and drank and were merry. When the supper was ended, Abraham prayed as usual, and Michal prayed with him. Then each lay down to sleep upon his couch in one room, while Isaac went to his chamber, lest he be troublesome to the guest. About the 7th hour of the night, Isaac awoke and came to the door of his father's chamber, crying out and saying, "Let me in, father, that I may touch you before they take you away from me." And Abraham wept together with his son, and when Michal saw them weep, he wept likewise. Then Sarah, hearing the weeping, called forth from her bedchamber, saying, "My lord Abraham, why this weeping? Has the stranger told you of your brother's son Lot, that he is dead? Or has something else befallen us?" Michal answered and said to her, "No, my sister Sarah, it is not as you say, but I think your son Isaac beheld a dream, and came to us weeping, and we, seeing him, were moved in our hearts and wept." Sarah, hearing Michal speak, knew that he was an angel of the Lord, one of the 3 angels they had entertained in their house once before. So she made a sign for Abraham to come to her door, and informed him of what she knew. Abraham said, "You say well, for I too, when I washed his feet, knew in my heart that they were the feet that I had washed that day, before they went to save Lot." Abraham, returning to his chamber, made Isaac relate his dream, which Michal interpreted, saying, "Your son Isaac has spoken truth, for you shall go and be taken up into the heavens, but your body shall remain on earth, until 7,000 ages have passed, for then all flesh shall arise. Therefore, Abraham, set your house in order, for you have heard what is decreed concerning you." Abraham answered, "Now I know you are an angel of the Lord, and were sent to take my soul, but I will not go with you. Do whatever you are commanded." Michal returned to heaven and told God of Abraham's refusal. He was again commanded to go down and admonish Abraham not to rebel against God, who had bestowed many blessings upon him, reminding him that no one descended from Adam and Eve can escape death, and that God, in his great kindness towards him, did not permit the lingering death to meet him, but sent his chief captain, Michal, to say to him, "Have you said to the chief angel, 'I will not go with you'?" When Michal delivered these exhortations, Abraham saw it was useless to oppose the will of God, and he consented to die, but wished to have one more desire fulfilled while still alive. He then said to Michal, "I beseech you, Lord, If I must depart from my body, I desire to be taken up in my body, that I may see the creatures the Lord has created in heaven and on earth. Michael went up to heaven and spoke before the Lord concerning Abraham, and the Lord answered Michael, Go and take up Abraham in body, and show him all things. And whatever he shall ask of you, do for him, as he is my friend. Next, Abraham views heaven and earth. End part 16 of 95, TheLegendsOfTheJews.com.